Thank you.
So I think the most probably the first question in the minds of the audience is the 1 hour long take. The camera never moves and never cut to another shot for a whole hour. And of course, there are lots of interviews on the soundtrack together with it. Why is, what is behind this daring strategy of yours?
Okay, so how much time do we have? So the
30 minutes.
thing is basically the way it started. This film started with a complete big bluff, and when I say that, I basically say that, you know, I had my producer wanted me to write a fiction, and I came up with this. Not with this, I came up with something else on paper. And basically what I had was a couple of, you know, a very baroque intention note full of theory and bullshit. And then together with, you know, a couple of facts and figures about La Rinconada, and also, you know, the place itself. And I said, you know, if you get me there, I'll bring you a film. And this was, you know, a hybrid documentary at first. So there would be, you know, a mix between genres, and I would be working with a family. I would be, you know, casting a non-actor that I would develop a script with, and so on and so on. And what happened is that we faced many problems that had to do with production, not because production was failing, but just because of the place itself. You know, it's like maybe you don't get the full impression in the film, but if you just Google it, you'll get to see, you know, all the background and all the, you know, all the social problems that actually exist in that community. And then at the same time, the community was very fed up about being portrayed in this way, you know, because you get mostly media people that just go there and just want to talk about, you know, the horror of La Rinconada. And it was very clear for me since the beginning as well that I was not making a social drama. And I was not, you know, pointing to the camera to these particular problems that were key points in that. And I was not making a campaign film, you know, because I do believe that those films are actually meaningful, but it's not really the cinema I'm interested in making. And so let's say, to keep it short, that this film was restructured every single day. And when I say this, I maybe to show you an example, is that I'm going to use something that has nothing to do, but it's very demonstrative of this fact, which is, let's say you imagine something with an helicopter, and your production says, you know, we got you a drone. It kind of does the same thing as in a helicopter shot, but the thing is that if you end up compromising, you know, even if it's just a scene or a core scene in your film, you will end up with something which is very mediocre in the end. So the plan was really, you have to reinvent a totally completed scene that ends up like getting you to reinvent the whole film. And that ends up being not just because the place was hard and we weren't sleeping there because it was dangerous and we had to commute every day for 2 hours, and, you know, I was shooting with the policeman on my back on nighttime because, you know, my crew wouldn't be able to shoot with me if I wouldn't accept this. And this was very hard for me to accept because, you know, there's all this ethics in documentaries, and this is not just the way I want to approach people. But even in location scouting, when we had our first Peruvian partners, you know, that there's just executive producers because it's impossible to fundraise in Peru. You know, they said, okay, you want to do location scouting, so you're going to take 2 bodyguards from Lima. And I was like, there's no way I'm going to go location scouting with 2 bodyguards. So, you know, every time there was this problem, and you get a crew going to bed without knowing what is the shooting plan next day. And for people that are used, you know, to professional shootings, that's very unsettling. And they want to know every time what we are shooting and what's the purpose for that, so that they can actually do their job in the best way. So going back to that long shot, the genesis of it was then in 2014, when I went first for location scouting at La Rinconada. It was just me and two other girls, you know, and a driver and some fixer. And basically, I got kind of a little obsession with that neighborhood, La Compuerta, and with that particular framing. And I ended up shooting something that, you know, I was shooting stuff for a teaser because we were still fundraising. And I shot something that was around 20 minutes or half an hour. And I was really pleased with that somehow. And I had a museum show that was being put up, and they were able to produce new works. And I said, okay, one of the new works that I want to produce is that I want to transfer this into a 16 mil that will run in mute. And then we also did some vinyl. We did a vinyl edition that on one side there were two musicians jamming, which is actually the music that you get in the credits. There was kind of a draft for those images, never a soundtrack. And on the other side of the record, you would get a patchwork of testimonies that I collected back then, folk music, radio shows, and so on and so on. So again, it was a draft of what we see in the very long shot as a soundtrack. And so going crazy with this thing about getting a new film every day, and until an extent that, let's say, after 1 week of being there, I thought about calling Lisbon and sending people home because we were just wasting money. And there were very, very big doubts about what we were doing there. Because one thing is when you reach like plan Z, it's like the question is, what am I making here? And of course we had all these things with the funds, and we would have to come up with a film in the end. So going back to the long shot, on the first day of shooting, I got the DOP and the sound recordist to shoot that. And they didn't know what they were shooting, but I was just, I like that place so much that at least I can have 2 hours of that place, because we were selling the installation, and maybe the museum wanted to get something on digital as well. And I was like, okay, I get it properly on 4K, and okay, at least we are not losing another day. And so we shot that for 2 hours, and they were very, very pissed because, it was very cold, and it was, suddenly I say, no, the camera is here, and, let it run, and you know what, you're gonna let it run for 2 hours. And after that, maybe when I landed in Lisbon, I was sure that what we were gonna try as an edit for the film was the film that we have here. And that was already as well a shot in the dark, in a sense that while we were editing it, we couldn't really afford to send it to the sound editing. So it was very, very dry as a rough cut. It was really just the pieces of testimony lined up together and selected. And for me, for that thing to work, it really had to build, what we see here, which are these kind of chambers of just containers of spaces that you can find in La Rinconada, and that there's some kind of mirror on the second part without the film being really a diptych. But so in the end, the structure, it's about, the scale and distances, and you have, or that was my intention, that, you have this very enigmatic shot, like I kind of, I called it, I was telling you in the cab that I call it kind of a trompe d'oeil tracking shot, because the camera is not moving, it is a fixed shot. But yet there's so much movement within the framing that I feel that there's some kinetic, effect to it. And the idea was to give you as much information, but without really chopping people's, stories. But about the place, and then what we would see afterwards, there would be some kind of resonance, but it wouldn't be as illustrative as matching exactly what is being said in the first part. And maybe these testimonies are kind of a close-up, while the shot that we actually see is, it's a wider shot. Sometimes it's hard to tell what is going on, and it has this kind of hypnotic trance-like movement. So there's very subtle rhymes, either graphical rhymes or just sound rhymes that are from one section to the other section of the film, and I think that kind of goes well along with this idea about the film being about landscape and how the human being gets inscribed in the landscape and so on and so on. So I told you it was a long answer.
So, any question from the audience?